Welcome to our panel session on leadership presented by MEMPC, the Master of Engineering Management Programs Consortium at WE20, the world's largest conference for women engineers. If you have any questions on the topic of leadership for our panelists, please submit them through the chat throughout the panel discussion, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the live Q&A section. Now, let's get started. MEMPC is a group of forward-thinking universities working together to promote engineering management programs to students and employers. Master of Engineering Management, or MEM, is a graduate degree geared towards developing engineers into business-savvy technical leaders. And what better way to showcase our MEM degree than by bringing together a panel of diverse, strong, technical women leaders who also just happen to be alumni of our MEM programs. So let's meet our panelists.
I'm Jennifer Way. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Pearchef.
Hi, I'm Millie Wares. I'm a member of the Principal Professional Staff at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and I run a program doing the independent evaluation of nuclear weapons security.
Hi, my name is Sagarika Dash. I work with Amazon as Pathways Operations Manager.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I am a program manager for Machine Learning Furnace at YouTube.
Hi, I'm Tina Oyinia. I'm the Associate Director for Flight and Safety Investigations at Raytheon Technologies.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Burke and I'm a consultant at Accenture specialized in consumer goods.
Thank you all so much for agreeing to be on this panel today. I'm really excited to hear about your leadership stories. Tell me, what was your first leadership experience like? And how did your engineering management degree help you in your journey towards becoming a leader?
So prior to joining MEM, I was working as a program manager. So, in a hybrid environment in which you generally don't get direct reports, but you still have to manage projects. So coming from an engineering background, my brain was all wired about being competitive and working on targets, and working on projects also mean the same. So you have a deadline you have to meet and more customer facing. So then after MEM, when I did my first internship during my MEM program, I came into a role in which I had to manage people who were in operations, like directly managing them like a 10-hour hourly shift manager. And then there was so much difference. I found that it's a hell and heaven difference between managing people who are just technically sound and you just need to manage them from technical viewpoint, versus training them to be a good human being, to think from an like human beings are not numbers, so treat them as human, and how to develop the right leadership in terms of developing a good workforce for the company. That was a hit the wall moment that I had to learn from. So yeah, that was my first leadership experience.
So I've had a number of leadership roles in my time in the military, but the thing that really strikes me the most was about 5 years ago, I totally had to revamp the program that I have to support the sponsor I have. And there were two completely different camps of people, highly technical, skilled engineers, mathematicians, and then military forces that were not necessarily technical. And so how do you take something that says, in order to build this, you have to go through these milestones, and transition it so that people that aren't technically oriented could talk? The thing that the engineering management framework gave me was, these are the places we have to, and these are the things we have to determine and why we have to determine them, and be able to not only parlay that to the engineering and the technical staff, but to the non-technical staff, so that we could come together. So I used my experience that I learned in the graduate program, as well as design thinking, in order to help translate, when I say this, it means that, and what does good look like to you and what does bad look like to you, and give me examples. And so it helps solidify around this framework of expectations, how a technical team communicates and a non-technical, and how they come together to make that. And so as I listen to Jennifer and Tanya and those that are out in these other areas and doing things with, your technical background is so completely important, but your ability to lead really depends on understanding that framework of what leadership expects, what the company expects. Bigger than the person, bigger than the team, it's the company. And I think that's the real win with this approach.
Yeah, and I second that, just in that, one thing to be able to, as you were saying earlier, work on a product, right? But how you communicate what is expected of that product, what are the requirements, what are the uses going to be for that. I think going through these programs, you really get to understand how to communicate with non-technical people. And because you have that technical background and you have the technical depth, you understand it. But then in these programs, you're learning, how do you make it more relatable to people who are not necessarily in the weeds the same way that you might have been in the past. So, with the program, what we did in SDM, just really understanding how do things connect and what is the product that we're offering to the world, I think was very helpful for me.
Prior to joining MEM, I worked in a very traditional engineering role. I worked at Motorola Solutions as a senior mechanical engineer. I had the opportunity to manage the summer intern, but aside from managing projects and doing sort of like a program management, customer facing engineering role, really I was isolated to sort of like a technical industry and sort of technical requirements for my day-to-day role. After MEM, I joined Accenture as a management consultant. And since then, I've really been working on more the business side of things. And really the desire for me and why I decided to pursue a master's and an MEM degree is really to get that business training. When I was working at Motorola, I recognized that really you can't avoid the world of business. It's understanding marketing, understanding sales, understanding the financial pieces of what drives technical decisions is so critical. And I wanted to gain that knowledge. So that was the motivation for why I chose to go do MEM and get an engineering management degree. And it really has opened a wealth of opportunities, a lot of doors. With that degree, I was really able to not only use the degree, but use the networking that I acquired through the program and really start getting roles that were more on, more perceived business side of things. I think in sort of today's environment, really all roles are pretty technical. Having a technical background and understanding sort of tech there's really no company out there that has no tech. So in a way, I think that having technical expertise is so important. But of course, that MEM degree really allowed me to be able to leverage both the left brain, right brain thinking, and really be able to get opportunities that were more traditional business. I've always been close with tech. Besides, like right now I work in food and beverage, which is really interesting. I'd be happy to take any questions anyone else has on that. I'm not in a very technical role right now, more pure operations, but I think MEM program has really allowed for me to sort of jump that bridge or navigate and travel that bridge to get to the other side of everything, including technical and business.
Well, I'll honestly just echo a lot of what everyone else said. I think they hit the nail on the head in terms of MEM being a great way to learn how to bridge the gap between very technical and also functional. Because I think when your undergrad engineer is very much focused on problem solving and you're in the computer lab and it's only like your problem sets and that's all that matters and you're so focused on it. And then you go to MEM and it's really more about learning your coursework and less about your grades. And it's like, understanding, okay, this is a problem, but the impact has a cost impact, it has a person impact. How do you resource that plan? How do you actually get it done? What's a blocker? What's not? And I think it just kind of forces you to consider things beyond the problem itself. And like you can't just jump straight to the solution because it may be the right solution, but if you can't fund it or if you can't staff it, you can't do it. So I think that's probably the biggest benefit I've seen, and it's been really helpful in the workforce, working with really technical people and understanding, where they're coming from, because you kind of were that person in the past, but then also knowing like, okay, I have to take this back to someone who's pure business and they will not understand what you're saying. And so I think that's for me been the biggest benefit, as well as just like having that opportunity after undergrad to sit back and think more broadly, I'd say, and take business courses and all the things that the other panelists have been saying. But yeah, that's kind of been my biggest takeaway from the program.
My first leadership experience, I haven't really had as much experience with like leading a team. It's been a lot of like efforts projects. So my first leadership experience was within, we had to set up like a vendor operations process, a global process where I was tasked to build a team of about 10 people in Hyderabad to about 100 people across Hyderabad, Sao Paulo, Krakow, like an entire global team. And I was successful, but not the way I would have liked to be successful. And when I think about leadership, I think about the legacy you want to leave behind. Like, what are people going to say when you're not looking, or when you're out the door, when you left? And when I think about that role, it would be said that I was very effective. But the characters that I would like to associate myself with being as a strong leader that was empathetic, that listened, the softer skills, I didn't focus on in that role. And I think it was after the fact, I go back to like my management class where we had to read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I went back after the fact to that book, like, wait, there's a better way to go about this. Like, I worked very hard. I was at work till midnight, and just like grinding, the little task manager, making sure everyone was on board. But it was later in my career that I started to adjust to like, okay, here's what this was all about. And here's why we spent X weeks reading this one book that seemed like just a toiling activity then. I reread the book and just started really applying it to my career. And I definitely saw the benefits. Like, it's like a lot of you have mentioned, it's about the people. And it's about building trust. It's about building empathy. It's about you get the most effectiveness. Yes, you get the job done, but when you start to think about what happens tomorrow, when you need a different job done, or when you need a little bit extra than what's within scope, or you need to tap this person for XYZ that's happening in 10 years, that's when like the extra, like, softer skills, we call them, but actually the most important skills, in my opinion now. Hindsight is 2020.
One thing that Tanya brought up too, that I think has also been sort of a echoing theme throughout our conversations, is sort of the perception of leadership. So we may feel that we are a good leader, maybe technically or functionally, but what is the perception? So to be a good leader, do you need for other people to think that you're a good leader, or is there a true good leader? And you can never make everyone happy. So I would love to sort of dive into that. What truly makes a good leader? Is it making everyone else happy? Is it making the business happy? Or is it making sort of something else optimized?
I would plus one that, like, even another angle is it acting like this one white man? Like the typical, like, is that what a good leader should look like? And I've been learning in my career, like, leadership looks very different. My current VP at my role, the most unassuming, the most, she never raises a voice, never really has an opinion, always looks at people like, what are your thoughts? But she's the most effective leader in the entire org. And it's just amazing to watch. And I think depending on the examples you see, especially when you're early in your career, you sort of like have a sense of like, this is who I'm supposed to be, the person that's the loudest voice in the room, like gets things done. And if you don't have enough exposure to different types of leaders, it gets tricky. But yeah, plus one.
I think what Tanya said about the leader at her company is spot on. And what I like to tell people is it starts with believing in yourself, right? Accepting who you are and looking in the mirror every day and saying, I'm okay with who I am. That has to be your fundamental, because you're going to then get adversity. And if you don't know who you are and you don't accept who you are, how do you handle the challenge that came at you? So your leader, she's got to be extremely comfortable and understand. And again, the framework brings you back to the framework. What is it I need to do? How do I need people back in this center place? And how do I keep them there? And then how do I develop their trust in me? Right? So I tell everybody, you have my trust. You don't have to earn it. It's yours to lose, right? And so you should guard that trust. You should hold on to it. And, it should be your hallmark. And that's how you start developing as a leader, because then you start understanding what your goals are, what their goals are, what the goals above you are, and trying to figure out how to make it work with all the different personalities that you mentioned, Jen. Just the difference in who you have and how you're trying to work with them. So those are the really kind of tenets. But to me, it starts with believing in who you are, and don't be distracted by somebody else's thought. Take the input, but go back and define for yourself who you are.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I definitely think a level of self-awareness is so important to good leadership. So I think that a leader doesn't necessarily need to be perfect. Like you don't, not everything in the Rolodex needs to be a strength, but if you are aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are, you can bring the right team to support you. But not having that level of self-awareness and not really knowing sort of where you sort of work best with people, that's when I think the troubles can really begin. So I think self-awareness is so important as a great leadership trait.
Yeah, and for me, I've worked for a lot of different leaders. I've had many roles, and one thing I've always found is you don't necessarily have to be the loudest. Some of the best leaders I've worked for are some of the quietest people when it comes to a room, right? And they're not the ones speaking all the time. They're the ones that's listening, and they usually say the least. But what they're saying is very effective. What they're saying is straight to the point, and there's not a lot of jargon and a lot of extra that goes with it. And what I've taken from that is, as a leader myself, is I tend to listen a lot more. I tend to ask certain questions. I don't try to ask tough questions where I'm trying to stump somebody. I'm trying to understand and then make a decision. And that's what I found with a lot of great leaders that I've worked for is it's really understanding the perspective of the people in the room, and it's listening 80% of the time, asking those one or two questions, and then making the right decision. So yeah, I've worked for some amazing people. I will say that.
Plus 1,000. I think the point about being comfortable with who you are, self-awareness is like so key. So you don't have to get distracted with presenting yourself in a certain way that people expect. Like you're just not threatened. Because I mean, I will go on a limb to say as women, we sometimes put ourselves under the pressure of like how we're supposed to show up. We're supposed to be perfect. We're supposed to have all the right words. We're supposed to have a question to show that we're listening. And, you just have all these distracting notions in your mind that sort of like takes your eye off the ball a little bit. So like that first, like self-awareness, being secure in who you are, not feeling threatened, and just focus on the business at hand, which is how do we get to the right solution? If it means you talk 2% of the time and 98% is everybody else that brings more strength to the situation, that's also okay because it gets you where you need to be.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Miley said. Like situational leadership is very, very important because there can be situations in which I have gone through many leaders who were like would only be strict, no jokes, no light moments, just be strict, stick to business. They have succeeded too, but sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes you just need to lighten the mood. Like say there is a situation in which, example, pandemic, already people are stressed out. How can we loosen that stress? Because you're spending almost 10 to 9 to 10 hours of your day in office. How can we loosen that and still have a good team bonding? So I guess situational leadership, and the one other lessons learned I had from a leadership perspective was acceptance. Acceptance of you as a leader, of accepting your mistakes in front of your people. Like, okay, we are humans, we are made to make mistakes, and we cannot be 100% perfect, but accepting it and letting team know that, hey, I'm your leader, I'm accepting my mistake, which means let's admit it, learn from it, and quickly brush our knees and go ahead. So that's also one of the very important traits that a leader should have.
One of the other things I'd like to add to that is I had this phrase that I told the people that I spoke with a few weeks ago, which is never let your value be somebody else's choice. So it's the same thing as I wake up every day and I like to be taller, maybe a little younger and a little thinner, but I'm okay with who I am, right? And it's me, and you either love me or you don't. And so I don't let anybody define my value. I don't fight with anybody that just wants to fight with me because they want to win that battle. I don't do it, right? I know my value. I define my value. And if they want to be distracted by that, go ahead, but I'm focused straight ahead. So I think that's another really important thing that we as women in the professional workforce have to remind ourselves. We're okay. I mean, look at all of us. We're willing to stand up and have this conversation in front of lots of people we don't know. You inherently believe in yourself and your value. And when somebody tries to shake it, take that deep breath, go home, let the squirrels get you there, but never flex with them. You know who you are, and you're all tremendously powerful. So I think that's a really, really important add-on. And it's kind of fun watching everybody here with all the different stories. Do you know what I mean? Because when you go through it, you feel alone, but when you see everybody else, you know you're going through it in community. It's exciting. I love all the faces.
Yeah, someone once told me that anytime you walk into a room, if you feel uncomfortable, remember that you deserve to be there and you're there for a reason. And that in and of itself gives you the self-confidence that you need, right? It's like, I'm here because I know what I know and I add value in some way, shape, or form. And that, even as a leader, right? Again, going back to making sure that you're confident within yourself, it allows you to lead more effectively, right? I know what I'm doing, I know why I'm here, and I'm gonna get the job done. It's the confidence piece.
I
So
completely agree. I would just, oh, sorry.
no, you go ahead,
Um,
no problem.
I would just add, like, the confidence is key, but also I know what I don't know, and it's okay, right? I don't have to know everything. It's okay if someone else in the room has the answer, and it's okay to admit that. I keep going back to this VP. She's so funny. We had this reorg where it was a mess. She wasn't on top of things. 2 weeks later, she's like, yeah, it just takes me a minute to get there, but here I have a plan. But she was very honest and transparent, like that she literally messed up for those like 3 to 4 weeks, so the whole org was a mess. But that actually built more respect for her, where she was able to own up to it, and then we could then come to the table to come up with a solution that then made sense.
Really, I think the feeder into the self-awareness that we're talking about is this ability to take feedback, to increase the self-awareness, right? Like I want to be as self-aware as possible, but I'm sure there's things with my team that maybe, they wish I would tweak a little bit, and maybe it's a sentiment shared across everyone, and the ability for them to feel comfortable, for myself as a leader to establish that open environment and safe environment for them to give me feedback openly, setting aside time to take feedback is so important for great team synergy. Whenever there's sort of like a shutdown environment and people start not feeling comfortable to give feedback, especially to their managers, especially to their leadership team, that's when things really start to fall apart.
Circling back to the topic about being a woman leader, like not just a leader, being a woman as a leader, like as Tina and Tanya were speaking, like you come into a room and you feel your confidence is shaken. I have experienced that being in operations, like when a woman starts to become affirmative and puts her point firmly, we get interpreted sometimes as being, like, oh, she's being rude, she's being bossy. I have got that feedback. But if the same thing happens to a male member, it is quoted as, oh, how confident he is. He knows what he's talking. So why not in women? So I think that's what we have to tell the upcoming women leaders, that, believe in yourself. If you are affirmative, you are affirmative. You're not being bossy.
That is a great segue into the third question about what are your tips and advice for up and coming women leaders.
I'm just inspired listening to everyone else. I feel like my confidence has gone up during this chat. I took some notes before the session on kind of points I wanted to touch on. I think one of them was something we kind of alluded to earlier, was like you walk into a room and you could see that you are the only woman, and it's something that I feel like it's hard not to notice because you look for people who look like you, and I think you notice that. But I think it's important to kind of also know that it doesn't really matter, or it should not matter, and just keep doing your thing. And people will like you if they like you, and if they don't like you, they don't like you. But I think as long as you kind of, just stick to what you are there to do, I think that's the important thing. And so my kind of advice was just to, like, it's okay to notice that, but just don't let it really impact the way that you act, the way you operate.
I'd like to add that in 1983, I was commissioned in the Navy when I graduated from the University of Missouri. And I put my certificate out there when I do these talks, and it says, you're commissioned a naval officer. You were hired as an engineer, you were hired as a director, you were hired as a project manager, you were hired as a software lead. They didn't say you were hired as a woman. You were hired as. And so I never imagined that I wouldn't promote. I never imagined that that would get in my way. And that sort of led to my thought that if someone puts a roadblock, you don't have to go through it, you just go around it. right? It's their challenge to you. Why do you care, right? Confidence in yourself, hired to do that job, the gender's got nothing to do with it. So it took a while to get to that point. I don't think it was necessarily easy. It was like a deep breath, and go home and fret about it for a while, put yourself back together. Anyway, each one of you got hired for a position, not for your gender.
I 100% agree with what Miley said just now. So I can recall one of my situations in which I joined a program. It was operations leader as a new product development team. And I was the only woman leader out of 80 people. So 80 people. And I walk into the room. I feel that nervousness. I'm like, oh God, where did I land up? Would I even succeed here? Would I even be heard? And then, like Tanya was speaking, like, just speak to yourself and tell that I don't come here as a gender. I came here because of a skill set. So my face is what I represent as my skill sets. So if I'm confident about my skill sets, 80 people, 800 people, I will do it. And I was successful in that role. So yes, irrespective of any gender, skills are important, and that's what you have to be confident about demonstrating and proving that yes, we are here for a reason, we were selected here for a reason, and we are proving that.
I plus one at what everyone said, but I'd also add, keep an open mind. Don't let the gender thing, like, don't carry it on your shoulder the entire time, but also recognize when there's something off and know when to get out of that situation. Because the reality is that there are situations where you're being discriminated against. And in those situations, ignorance is not bliss. You need to have the right sponsors, mentors, champions. I use the phrase like the board of directors of your life that you should be always checking in with. Like, what's happening here? Is this a person who had a bad day? Or is there something deeper happening here? And recognize that and get out if you need to. I'd also say there's one last thing that came to my head that has now left. It'll come back. I'll let you guys know.
I've actually heard that advice on the board of directors before. I think it's really interesting because I think that's something when you're at work, you find people and you watch what they do and they're just so inspirational that they're doing something that you really like. And it's like you want to emulate that. You want to have them as a mentor. I think that's also very important, is finding people who you want to emulate or you think are doing something really well, something either you're not great at or something you want to develop. I think it is key to have those people you can go to, even if it's very specific. Like I want to talk to them about promotions, or I want to talk to them about their specialty and how they got there and something like that.
I think definitely having a mentor, no matter sort of whatever stage in life or role you have in a company, like an internal mentor, external mentor, someone that close to you that will listen to you with sort of no bias and really be able to give feedback on the situation. Because sometimes where you're just in the weeds and doing something day to day, you can get lost in the emotions. So being able to step back and have a very objective conversation with a trusted party just on sort of the current situation, if you're stressed out or if you're, just need feedback on something, I think is very, very helpful in any role, and especially as a leader.
I remembered my point. I wanted to just, I know we're not really talking about that right now, but I did want to address like some things that are specific to us as being women. I recently went on maternity leave, and just things that are going to happen to us, period. You're taking care of kids. Your life is set up differently for a man. I think what I've learned in that situation is, for me, I work at an amazing company that, gives you the right amount of maternity leave, and we're good. We're set up, right? But at the same time, I do recognize that my promo was a little slower than it would have been if I hadn't gone on maternity leave. I might have planned it differently, maybe not taking the entire 6 months as a stretch. Maybe I should have done 1 or 2 months here and there. Like, I think the point I'm making there is recognize like the unique situations you're in because you're a woman, and talk to the right people, and get the right advice so you can navigate it properly. I think dismissing it and being like, no, let's just lean in and everything will work out, might not be the right strategy. Nothing against lean-in, but I just think we should be aware of like what is the situation around you and how do you need to plan your life. I've been so blessed with having people around me that just recognize like, oh, you should be here and let me sponsor you and get you to where you need to be. Not everyone is in that situation, so you kind of have to hustle for yourself to find those types of people. And I literally had a conversation with my manager a couple of weeks ago. I was like, yeah, your promo has been a while. Let's work on getting you back on track. And that was a blessing for me, because I felt like I just got back from maternity leave. This is a new team. Who am I to be talking about promo? I need to just put my head down and prove myself. And I've been praying a lot about it. Like, I'm putting my head down, but I realized something that happened here. And it worked out. And, it was such a relief and a blessing to hear that. But I was lucky and I was blessed, and you might not find yourself in that situation. So you need to just be thinking and be aware of what's my situation right now, and how do I need to get out or move forward or progress.
Well, so to that end, when my husband and I, my husband was in the Navy too, and he was going to command of a submarine tall as the Washington Monument, 5 stories tall if you turn it sideways, 5 stories high, 555 feet, 150 lives, and then you've got the families. We made an agreement between ourselves as to who had the more important career, who had family and who had the career. And so it goes back to, I am who I am and I'm okay with that, right? Men get sick, men get injured, men miss work. They don't beat themselves up about it near like we do because we have it. But at the end of my days, they're not going to say mom didn't miss a single meeting. They're going to say mom loved me and she was there when it mattered. And so it goes back to, I'm okay and I'm not going to accept your judgment of me for being different at this milestone in my life, because this milestone matters to me. So going back to having a vision of what you as a couple want and how you're going to handle it, because if you don't, something doesn't work. Just like if you don't manage the project, if you don't manage the relationship, make those hard choices so that when it comes, there's no arguing about it. You decided, you make more than I do, I make more than you do, you've got the kids, I've got the career, and you decide it and you go with it. And that makes life work. You're managing both aspects of it. So fascinating to hear your story. So good for you all. It's exciting.
I think my piece of advice is to do things that scare you. So my career is hilarious. If you look at my resume, I'm a civil engineer is what I graduated with, and I ended up in aerospace working like safety stuff, and I've traveled the world, and I've always taken roles that are, when you look at it and then you look at my resume, you're like, oh, there's no way you can do this job. It's like, that's the one I want. That's the challenge. Let's go for it. And those are the ones that stretch me. And those are the ones that I consider to be fun. So, and I always walk into a role and I tell my managers or whoever's my superior, I say, I will leave when I'm no longer having fun. And I have every single role. It's like, all right, I think it's time. I think I've gotten what I need out of this job, and it's time to go do something else that puts me on the edge and something else that makes me sweat, and you don't need those roles all the time. I've taken breaks because you do need to have some fun, but settling in for too long is not something I like to do. So I always try to take the role that is going to scare me, and the role that when I look at it, I'm like, you should not be doing that. And I'm like, oh, you should do it. So.
One thing I would say is, as a woman leader and as any leader, with all the fast pace of how the world is going to be, like technologically crazy, giving short targets, acting very fast, we should not forget to celebrate those small wins. It may be just a small win. Okay, I was a consultant. I reached out to 200 customers and one of my clients replied. That one is your win. Celebrate that win. Have something, a sweet dish, or celebrate with your family, with your team. Share out some candies. Pat your back that yes, I did it. So something was that which made the success happen. So take that lessons learned and go forward. So yeah, celebrating that win success, that small little success, may change your day for the whole and end your day in a nice way.
Yeah, and just to add on to that as well, like have fun with everything, right? Like have fun with life, right? Like don't feel like, oh, you know, to be successful, or how I define success is I must be a leader, right? There's plenty of ways to show leadership without necessarily being, you know, in some role with a certain title. I think in any role in society, anyone out there can show leadership through strength, through having good morals, having good intentions, working well with the team. There's a variety of ways to show leadership. I think there's a lot of different ways that that term can be defined. So really don't restrict yourself in how you think, how you approach life. Really pursue what makes you happiest, and know that really whatever path you choose to go down, you can be a leader and be very happy and fulfilled and be very respected as a woman.
On that amazing note, Jennifer, I would like to open it up for questions. I would also like to say a big thank you again to all our panelists, as well as to you, our viewers, for tuning in for our panel session on leadership. If you have any questions about Master of Engineering Management or Master of Engineering Management Programs Consortium, come find us at a virtual booth at the Career Fair. We look forward to talking to you.